career high. He had 28 goals a few years ago in Florida, 25 this year. So like that's not nothing, but he's going to get a contract that I think I'm a little worried if a team doesn't have the right setup for him to play the role he's in there behind Barkov, because he's going to get paid like a number one center, I think, in free agency, and he is not that guy. At least he never has been, and this long into his career, I'd be surprised if he suddenly became that player.
And if it were me, we've talked about this. He'd be the number 2 target if I were Kevin Adams, and with him and maybe Marchand, you're taking a chance because of the age, and you just never know how that's. I mean, when does it end for a player? For some players, they go a long time and can go. Look at Marchand at 37 or 38, whichever he is, and we talked about Tuch's contract a little while ago. When he signs his new deal, he'll be 30. Well, if you give him a 7 or 8 year deal, you're taking him to 37 or 38 years old. So you just don't know when it is. But I still, with what he does in the playoffs, he just for 2 years in a row now has just come up huge when it's time to play, and he's, he can play at both ends of the rink, especially in the playoffs. I think he gets a little bit tighter defensively in the playoffs maybe than he does in the regular season, but it's not like he's bad in the regular season. But if you're expecting 100 points out of him, you're going to be disappointed. That's not what you're going to get. But, I just like players who, when it's on the line, the biggest games, they come up with the biggest games when it matters. And he does that. Now, I still would say Ekblad would be my number 1 priority to play with Power. And it seems, with what we're reading, that maybe Ekblad might be the guy who's available. It seems like maybe Florida will re-sign Bennett and maybe not re-sign Ekblad, just by some of the things I've been reading along the way. And so it could be – I don't think they can sign them both, honestly.
Unless they both agree to, hometown discount, whatever, right? We want to keep the band together, so I'll take $1 million less or $2 million, whatever. That might be out there. It's been, I think, pretty widely circulated. They're tight. So maybe that could happen. I mean, I don't know. Business is business, we know. But
I'd be more interested in the really good defensemen to try to help the young defensemen here, especially because if the Sabres don't improve drastically defensively, they're not going to make the playoffs. They can't be 29th in the league and make the playoffs. They just can't, even though they can score goals, certainly. I mean, they were 4 goals from being 6th in the league in goal scoring this year. But that's not their problem. Their problem is keeping the puck out of the net.
Paul Hamilton with us. Doesn't sound like many people know too much about where things are headed with Connor McDavid, Paul. So I'm not asking you to know something that none of us knows either. But now it's such a tight window, right? Like the season ends on June 17th. Free agency is July 1st. In McDavid's case, with a year left, that's just sort of the starting period for a new deal. I feel like Edmonton could very well go to Connor McDavid and say, we'll give you anything you want. Blank check, record money, whatever it is, anything you want, name it. In an effort to keep him, of course, which is what they'd want to do. But I'm not sure McDavid would say yes, right? Because wouldn't everybody else make him the same offer if it got to that point? So he'll be interesting here in a few weeks.
Yeah, he's going to get whatever he wants. So it's like, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? And you now have made the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row with Edmonton, which I think would help the Oilers' case. I always wondered how he felt being in Edmonton, especially when the draft lottery came up and all of a sudden the Edmonton Oilers got the pick. I mean, the look on his face got flushed, as did Gary Bettman's, and
mine.
He wanted to be a Sabre.
I think so.
He wanted to come play in Buffalo. Remember that game that Erie played here at the arena, and he came for the press conference, and being close to here, that's what he was looking at. But it's a number of years later now, 9 years later, and they're very, very close. So I haven't heard anything at all that he's unhappy in Edmonton or doesn't like being there. And with them now just on the cusp of doing it, I would think he's okay with it, but of course I'm not his agent.
Well, if he's not, willing to take their deal, then he becomes a trade candidate.
Sure, and don't forget the Gretzky thing in Edmonton was a little bit different. That was basically the league going to Peter Pocklington and saying, we need Wayne Gretzky in the United States. Sorry. With you're going to get a lot of money in return, which Pocklington liked.
He needed, yeah.
He needed. Right. And we need him as a league in Los Angeles. So that's different than what we're talking about here with McDavid.
Well, Paul, we're heading for the draft. You're talking about Ekblad and Bennett. Like, I mean, do you feel like the Sabres? That sounds very foreign, I think, to maybe a lot of our listeners and to me.
Understandable.
I can't imagine a world where those guys take our call, but
sure.
I'm very demoralized. So, it's hard for me to get invested in the idea of, top shelf players, 2-time cup winners, like going, oh yeah, no, Kevin Adams is on the phone. Sure, I'll talk to Buffalo. I'm being defeatist, admittedly, about it. How realistic do you think any of that is?
Yeah, that's the caveat we've said all along. I understand we all understand that it's a long shot that any of the top free agents would want to come to a team that hasn't been in the playoffs for 14 years and is just still floundering around. They're really, how much hope is there right now if you're looking at the Buffalo Sabres from the street? But stranger things have happened. I mean, Kyle Oposo was the number one free agent of his class because Stamkos signed before free agency started, which made Oposo the number one free agent, and the Sabres got him. Johnny Gaudreau was signed with Columbus as the number one free agent. Nobody thought that would happen. So stranger things have happened. But no, obviously, I would not think the Buffalo Sabres are on top of anybody's list right now, especially with, you look at the Sabres and if, you hear, well, wait a minute here. We're hearing through Elliot Friedman that Byram might be traded and Tuch might be traded and Peterka might be traded and what? I mean, honestly, I'm just going to say it. They cannot afford to lose Alex Tuch.
Right.
He does so many different things and does them well for this team. They cannot afford to lose him off this team, or it's just going to be 10 steps backwards. He's part of the team that, if you want to say they're going to improve or they improved at the end of the year, he was a big part of that in every way, whether it's penalty killing, whether it's scoring 36 goals, whether it's leadership. They just can't afford to lose him. And, so if you're a free agent, you're looking at, well, what's going on there? Are these guys going to – and if Buffalo loses all three of those guys, what do you think Thompson and Dahlin are thinking?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about Tuch, and you know this because we've talked about this at Locker Cleanout. I was scared by the way he took the question about his future.
Yes.
And so that doesn't have to meet. A listener pointed out to me that maybe that's just the start of negotiation, right? He didn't want to portray that he's so eager to sign, put anything in front of me and I'll do it. So okay. I sure hope that that's right because, Paul, it feels to me, yeah, I agree 100%. I know it's never going to be one move means turn the lights out, but if the guy that is the face of the "we want guys who want to be here" campaign doesn't want to be here anymore,
who's been a Sabre fan his whole life,
right? Then what am I even doing here? It just seems really, really tough. I hope it doesn't come to that.
And maybe Alex Tuch is also, he's got another year. He might say, look, let's see how this is going to go. You brought in Yarmo. He's a guy who's been a GM for 11 years. He brings some experience here. He brings some guts to the position that, maybe the Sabres might be able to pull some things off. We don't have to do it this year. There's still 1 year left on the contract. So he might say, look, all right, let's see how this year goes. and we'll talk to you next summer.
Then it becomes on the Sabres to decide whether they want to live that way, right? Because that
because
gets
then
dangerously
you
close.
may lose them to free agency for nothing.
Right.
Paul,
so you never know.
Sorry, sort of on this topic before you go, you want to mention, or I'll just tee you up here, the article on J.J. Peterka, a lot of this and sort of along the same lines.
Yeah, I was curious, and I didn't remember him being, like, I want out of here, or I'm unhappy.
Yeah, he didn't set off any warning flares on locker cleanout.
So I went back
Byram
and listened.
did, Tuch did, but not.
Yeah,
Peterka.
I went back and listened, and I was right. There was nothing in that end of the year press conference that told me he wants out of here. He talked about Lindy Ruff. He was fine in talking about Lindy Ruff. He talked about how he can get better. It was more we. He even talked about his
body language
and everything. And he said, I get frustrated. I totally agree on that. And I'm just trying to have my body language be better, more positive, is what he was saying. And you remember a couple of years ago, he'd score a goal, and he was so happy. He was like a little kid out there. And that changed this last year. He'd score, and he just, he had a scowl on his face. And he's always, available to the media all the time, never says no. But when you talk to him now, he's basically looking at the floor and just looks miserable, Not that he hates the person he's talking to. He just looks miserable, you know. And so is that the frustration, going out? But there's nothing. So, is it Ruff? Is it Adams? Is it Pagula? Is it the losing? But he hasn't been here for all that much losing yet. It's not like some of the others that have been here 6-7 years.
Yeah.
Or is it already to a point now? Is it the contract? Has there, when you look at the negotiation, is that a problem right now? Is Peterka and his agent, Alan Walsh, are they upset with the offer? Are they at an impasse? And is that it? That could be it. I'm just grasping at things right now. But I was listening to that, and I was just thinking to myself, there's just nothing here that indicates to me that he's unhappy.